Well, the war in Ukraine has brought far-reaching changes to Europe's security infrastructure. Among them is Finland joining NATO and doubling the length of the alliance's border with Russia. NATO members Norway, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania and Poland share a 1,200-kilometre border with Russia and its enclave Kaliningrad. Now, Finland's border with Russia is more than 1,300 kilometres long. Our correspondent Teri Schultz reports now from the border town of Imatra on Finland's plans to safeguard NATO's northeastern flank.
After more than a century of self-reliance and security, Finland now has reinforcement as the 31st member of NATO, sharing the alliance guarantee of mutual defense. For decades, Moscow had warned its western neighbor not to go there.
The red line for the Russians, was our, accession to NATO, and of course we were waiting for, some kind of reaction. We've seen what Russia has done in Ukraine, so basically anything is possible.
No one knows anymore whether there are any lines the Kremlin won't cross. It's believed perhaps half of Russian forces normally stationed along the Finnish border have been pulled into the war in Ukraine. But it's not only soldiers Moscow uses to try to destabilize other countries. There's another tactic it employed several years ago that Finland wants to guard against.
It was a significant number of immigrants pushed by Russians to the Finnish border and crossing also Finnish border. And, we did manage those numbers. However, you will never know, this is kind of a preparation for the future.
By this, Juha Martelius means the fence Finland is building along its border with Russia near the city of Imatra, about 250 kilometers northeast of Helsinki. Imatra Mayor Matthias Hilden says for decades, city residents did not think of Russia as a threat. Large numbers of Russians visit or live in Imatra, but that was before the Kremlin launched war on Ukraine.
And now we don't have any possibility for that anymore. And that's why we have fought everything differently and joined NATO. And that's why it's just so different world than what we were living 1.5 years ago.
No one is sure what that different world will look like, and some fear the worst.
People who had very clear plans and no worry about the future, they were thinking, maybe I'll put that off for a year and see how things go, and that kind of thing. So,
in case what?
Well, just the uncertainty, I think, is what it is. Because do you want to invest and put a lot of money into something and then, within a year or so, be that it's under somebody else's control or something?
It's like imaginary safety. I think the fence wouldn't really matter if they would come with the tanks or some kind of power.
The 3-kilometer pilot project is slated to be done this summer, stretching to 200 kilometers over the next several years.
Well, that report from our correspondent Teri Schultz, who joins us now from the Finnish border station in Imatra. Welcome, Teri. What have border guards there been telling you about potential threats from over the way?
Well, we've just taken a tour of the area where this border fence will be built. And what the Finnish border guards say is that at the moment, everything is calm. Everything is operating normally, and that their Russian counterparts are doing their jobs and stopping anyone without the proper authorization from trying to get into Finland. There hasn't been a single case of that this year, in fact. But what they're worried about is the unpredictability of the Russian government now, after everyone has seen what has happened to Ukraine. And they say while the situation remains calm, they're going to build this fence just in case the border guards on the other side, the Russian side, get orders from the Kremlin to try to destabilize Finland with some of these hybrid tactics, like sending undocumented people over the border.
Does seem ironic, given that the whole idea of joining NATO was to help Finns feel safer.
Well, that's true, but we're talking about different kinds of threats here. The idea that this hybrid tactic of possibly compelling people to try to cross into Finland and destabilize the country is different from a military incursion. But I have to tell you, we've heard concerns about both kinds of threats. We did hear people say that they were worried that after the war in Ukraine ends and Russia refills its garrisons here on the other side of the border, they may try to come in and take Finnish territory. That's something I haven't heard before. in Finland. There are people who are worried that there could be a situation like in the Donbass with Russia occupying parts of Finnish territory. Now, that may seem like an exaggeration, but it's not completely out of the thinking of Finns here now.
Right. And much has been made of the way that this war has backfired on Russia. Now that Finland's joined NATO, the doubling of the length of NATO's border with Russia. But does this bring headaches for NATO as well? I mean, how does it affect the alliance's ability to defend itself against attack?
You know, that's something that was under debate for a long time, both inside Finland and inside NATO. But the truth is that Finland is a security provider for NATO. It brings a country, remember, that had planned to defend this 1,340-kilometer border by itself for the foreseeable future. And Finland is ready to do that and very well equipped. So, in fact, both NATO and Finland feel like it's now a win-win situation. Like, this brings more security to the alliance to have a country like Finland that's been self-reliant for so long now inside the alliance.
Thanks for that, Teri. Teri Schultz from the Finnish-Russian border. And we can take a look at the broader security landscape facing Finland with Hannah Smith, who's an expert in Finnish security policy. Welcome to DW. Let's start with this fence. They're building 3 kilometres of a fence that will eventually be 200 kilometres on a border that's 1,300 kilometres long. What good is that going to do?
Well, it is probably quite curious to think about it and the middle of a forest as well. But the real issue there is to raise the border capabilities and to equip those fences with different cameras, detecting devices and so on. And this one gives much higher early warning capabilities, monitoring who comes, responses quicker, etc.
Right. So this 200, if it is eventually built, this 200-metre-long fence will give the 1,300-kilometre, this 200-kilometre-long fence will give the 1,300-kilometre border much more security. It just sounds weird.
It does, but it has a certain places. This is also something to do with the geography in the way that where are those places that it is easy to cross because there are swamps, forests, lakes, etc. So you don't really cross very easily when there is a swamp or a lake or something like that. So, right. And where are those real places? This is a little bit in that direction.
Okay.
And it might be continued, this planning as well.
Understood. And perhaps you could outline for us what Finland's main security concerns about Russia are.
Well, I think it could be said very shortly to say that Russia is unpredictable. So therefore, you need to be prepared for everything, to absolute worst case scenarios, and even the fact that Russia might be nice one day. Both of those are quite unexpected, perhaps, and unbelievable today, but we need to be prepared. And everything is done in a Finnish security policy to kind of imagine the unimaginable, so to speak. And this fence is part of that.
Right. And we know that Finland has already worked extensively with NATO countries. There's extensive interoperability. What changes now that they're actually inside the club?
Well, more international cooperation. That's definitely what changes. Also, there is a big change in Finnish kind of strategic culture with this NATO membership. Eventually, we will have perhaps a new type of approach to Russia as well. But Finland is preparing both the unconventional, the kind of hybrid threat activity, and the conventional, which is the traditional war we have seen. So we need to be preparing for everything, and that's what we are actually seeing currently. So the fence is just the one puzzle in a very, very big picture.
Okay, thank you for that. Hannah Smith, Finnish security policy expert. Thank you.
Thank you.
For more, we can talk now to Iiro Särkkäs. She's a research fellow with the Finnish Institute of International Affairs and joins us from Helsinki. Thanks for joining us. Now, we heard a resident of Finland in that report voicing concern that Russia might try to now capture Finnish territory. Is that fear justified?
Well, I think the general public has these fears, obviously, but I mean, the border fence is not being built because Finland is joining NATO. It's basically in order to reinforce the kind of deterrence and defense against hybrid threats. So the border authorities, they know that the border is very long, and we need to be very efficient and make sure that the border wouldn't be used for hybrid means of influencing. But per se, it has nothing to do with the fact, for instance, that Finland is joining NATO, and as a NATO ally, Finland will be defended by NATO Article 5. So it's not a question of Russian troops, for instance, or tanks coming over the Finnish-Russian border.
Short of invading Finland, what sort of pressure is Russia already exerting on its Nordic neighbour?
Well, I mean, we have seen these hybrid sources of influencing in previous years. For instance, like that was in the inset already, illegal immigration, and this cannot be overruled in the future either. It is possible that Russia will use this means of hybrid influencing in the future as well. So the border authorities will have to make sure that the long border will be fully covered, and especially those areas which are more highly populated and more easily accessible by different kinds of transport routes, for instance, that can be better protected. But obviously, in the future, we could see other ways of hybrid influencing and threats as well, such as hybrid attacks. But that per se already is covered by NATO's Article 5 per se. And then obviously we have had some airspace violations in the future. That could also take place in the future. But as Finland is a NATO ally now, we are in a much safer place than we were before joining the alliance.
And it must be mentioned that a lot is happening in the cyber sphere as well, which we don't really see. Now, Russia says Finland joining NATO is a threat to its national security. It's promised countermeasures. What form might those countermeasures take, Eero?
Well, I mean, this is very traditional rhetoric from Russia's part. I mean, this rhetoric's been ongoing for years already. Russia has always resisted NATO's enlargement, but we have to say this: that Finland, as a peaceful country, we are not, joining NATO to threaten any country, not Russia, not anyone else, and therefore we are doing it just to maximize our own national security. I think as Finland becomes NATO member, the likelihood of seeing any kind of threats imposed by Russia will decrease tremendously because we have NATO's Article 5 as a deterrence from now on.
Eero, thank you very much for talking with us. That was Teri Schultz, a research fellow at the Finnish Institute of International Affairs.
Thank you.